if you're struggling in the business, I would encourage you to look at your daily activities, look at your daily things that you're doing, and ask yourself, what are the top 20% of those tasks and things that I have to do that would account for a majority of my revenue, of my profits? And then you ask yourself this question: where am I spending most of my time in? And if you're struggling, I would tell you that's probably very possible that majority of your time is spent in that 80%, not in the 20%.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Life Eater Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Life Eater Show, aside from being ridiculous, we help people make more, work less, and live awesome lives. I'm joined by my co-host, Polish Peter. And as you can see, we are in a special immersive studio. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, I just ran across this in Zoom and I'm like, this is so hilarious. We need to record like this, even though
I literally can't right now.
We're literally going to lose like all 3 listeners we have right now, man. But it's worth it because it's so funny. And I put a high value on stupid humor, you know, and there's a reason why like Dumb and Dumber is like my favorite movie ever, right? So we are living.
You know, you have to excuse my friend. The town you're looking for is that way.
Okay. Listen, we have.
By the way, listen, before we get into the episode, I want to tell you something, but did I tell you to stop banging your head against the wall?
Oh, you had to point that out, didn't you? I got this weird red spot on my head. I don't know what that's from. It's so strange. It's just it's the angle, man. It's the light. It's the light.
Okay,
right.
Well, let's go to the seriousness of this episode.
All right, so here we go. And you know, listen, we're having fun, but guess what? Business should be fun. Life should be fun, dude. People think they have to just like. Life has to suck. No way. Like life is supposed to be awesome. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be, you know, just ridiculous. And so we are going to have that. And that's the theme of like what we do, right? Like, so we have fun and we take care of the stuff that needs to get taken care of. And so like, we're going to talk about in this episode, part 3 of our guiding business principles. And again, this is from a bonus extra kind of session, extra content we have at the Business Builder Workshop. And these are just guiding overarching principles that when you apply to your business will kind of start to structure your mindset and the way you think and facilitate your business in a way that'll kind of like just be shortcut your learning curve. And like these things are very practical though. They're like they're principles, but they're also, you know, practical. They're practical principles. Let's say it that way. So I'm going to share my screen now and again.
So hold on. Are you going to put that screen on the movie screen? Are you going to put it on the movie screen?
I am.
I
am. We are going to do that, Peter. This is next level. We should have tested this in advance, but we're doing it live. So here we go. We're going to share the screen. I'm going to go to slideshow, and we should be able to see this on the screen.
What?
Now,
make sure your surround sound is on for those of you listening.
Yeah, right. right. Because there's so many awesome sound effects here. But with that being, actually, is there sound effects here? No, there's not. Okay. So, all right, here we go. This is the first. We have 4 principles to get through. We covered 6 already. These are the last 4, and we're going to start off with the 80-20 principle. And this is called the Pareto principle. And what it says, and first of all, let me back up. There's a lot of general applications to this that are very powerful. But in addition to that, I also want to kind of just let you know that it's not an exact science. It's not exactly 80.0% or 20.0, but it's a principle. It's an overarching theme that the minority of X leads to the majority of Y. So let's say it this way. You can say 20% of your clients bring in 80% of your income. You could also say 20% of your customers lead to 80% of your problems. You can say that 20% of your products lead to 80% of your revenue. And it's, 20% of your time accounts for 80% of your results, like these kinds of things, right? And so it's an overarching principle.
Yeah, and this applies to, like Wojo said, to everything. And that's why we're talking about this particular principle, because I think this is especially important when it comes to business. Like he mentioned, 20% of your clients, and this is just rounded out numbers, right? Could be 10, could be 30, could be 25, could be something along those lines. But generally speaking, it's about 80-20. So think about it this way. If 20% of your clients bring 80% of your revenue, what does that tell you? Think about this. It can tell you, like, start looking from the perspective of, like, who are my most successful clients? Who are the people who are bringing those 20% of 80% of my revenue. Or the 20%. And then I can start really digging in and figuring out, okay, what type of client is this? Who are they? And then start looking, okay, let's go and find more of those types of clients.
Yes.
And now you're building your business on the top 20% of your clients. That's just one example.
Well, and there's so many examples, right? So the places I want to encourage you to look at is not just, look at your efforts. Like, where are you spending your time? 20% of your time is spent, on the things that are going to give you 80% of your results. Look at your clients, your customers, like who are your best ones? And then also with this rule, don't forget there's the opposite. Like, you have the 20% of the good and you have 20% of the bad. And so, like, what's the 20% of your business that's sucking up 80% of your resources? Like, so you can play the seesaw game where you're looking at the positive effects of this and the negative and apply that to your business. And so, for instance, we had a gentleman, his name is Jimmy, come out to the Business Builder Workshop. And he realized that one of his businesses, he had 4 businesses, one of which was taking up half of his time, but it was only producing 20% of his income. So in effect, this is almost like an 80-20 principle applied to the number of businesses he had, even though the numbers, again, weren't exactly 80-20. We had, and for instance, we have a podcast coming out here soon with a gentleman that you're going to want to catch this one, by the way, where he talks about how he kind of focused his business on the top 20% and built out the rest of the 80 based on that 20. I don't want to give away the secret of that one, but that's an illustration. Look at where you're spending your time, because like 20% of the things you should be doing are going to give you the disproportionate results of that 80%. And so that's where you want to focus, right? And so like this is kind of a general principle. So 80% of your results comes from 20% of your efforts. 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. 80% of your personnel problems come from 20% of your staff. And so this is the general principle that really helps you focus on all this really is an illustration of prioritization. So you're really realizing what is the most important, highest leverage things that I should be doing, and what are the things that are kind of just the fluff or fill in the gaps that are kind of time wasters or ineffective or not giving you the results you want.
So listen, I want to point something out too, because business owners, those of you who are listening right now, entrepreneurs, if you're struggling in a business, I would encourage you to look at your daily activities, look at your daily things that you're doing, and ask yourself, what are the top 20% that, of those tasks and things that I have to do that would account for a majority of my revenue, of my profits? And ask yourself, when you start looking at, let's say, your top 20% includes making calls, doing marketing, or, having conversations with, possible clients, right? If you're a real estate investor, maybe the top 20% means that you are going out and, driving for dollars or knocking on doors or having conversations with those possible clients. And then you ask yourself this question: where am I spending most of my time in? And if you're struggling, I would tell you that's probably very possible that majority of your time is spent in that 80%, not in the 20%.
Yeah.
So if you just look from this perspective, from this principle, it can literally shift how you operate in your business to become more successful. Instead of looking for this next shiny object that's going to change how you're going to run your business, or this marketing strategy, or this tool, or this AI now is huge, right?
Yeah. If
you just look at the 80-20 rule here and start looking, okay, let me start focusing more, spending more time on the top 20%. The 20% that's accounting for 80% of my sales, and those kinds of stuff. And it will literally transform your business, I think.
Yeah. And let's say you have a situation, you're like, well, I have these 2 things and they're both producing 50% of my revenue. Okay. Then what do you think you should do? I'll tell you what I would do. I'd start to look at, okay, where am I spending my time? So let's say that one of those 50%, you got 2 things, equivalent results, I'm using air quotes here, using revenue as a test. But if you're spending 80% of your time on one of those and 20% on the other, imagine what would happen if you kind of shifted that balance. That what seems to be equivalent activities really aren't equivalent. And so you can start to look at that, or maybe your cost of goods is different. And, you could make a differentiation there and you have better margins on one of those products, for instance. And so you got to kind of start to play with this a little bit. It's not always readily apparent, which is the which is the exact thing you should be focusing on. But the other thing we haven't even talked about yet is the results with this, is that they compound like in layers. And so imagine for a second, even let's say you focus on the 20% of things that should be giving you 80% of your results. If you take now that 20% of the 20%, meaning 4%, like 4%, because 20, listen, none of my degrees are in math, but I know this, 20% times 20%, 20% of 20% is 4%. And so 4% of the things you're doing now mathematically equate to about 64% of your results. And so you can see how very quickly, if you start, it's just a continual whittling away of like, what is the best and most valuable thing, task, effort, product that I can offer that's going to give me the results that I want. And that's the thing that you want to focus on. And you could go down to even another layer of that. And, 20% of the 20% of the 20%, or 0.8% is 52% of your results. And so, you can play with this, but that's super powerful to consider employing in your business.
And if you look at the people who are successful, I think they're constantly looking at that perspective. Maybe not so much, it's an 80-20 rule, but they're looking at their time, the resources, the people they hang out with, the people they talk to, the, everything in their life, they're looking from the perspective, the 80-20. Yeah. What are the top, 20% that think, so for instance, the guys who are, successful, maybe they're not cutting their own grass because that doesn't account for the revenue in their life or satisfaction or whatever it might be, right? So when you start looking from that 80-20 principle, you can literally account this and put this into every single area of your life. Yeah. You got 4 kids, which 20% of your kids are the best ones that you want to hang out with, and which 80%,
You said that. I did not say that.
All right. Yep. So
send Peter your message on that one.
Listen, let's be honest. We all have a favorite kid, right? On that note, listen, before we move forward, looks like you're sitting at the edge of your seat, man. Like you're a tiny little kid sitting on the edge of the seat. Look, I'm sitting comfortably in mine.
Check that out.
What's the deal there, dude?
I know. Why do I look like I'm in the kiddie pool over? It's kiddie table over here.
You are.
It does look. It looks kind of funny. All right.
All right. Let's keep moving, man.
Here we go. So now here's another important one. You got to measure. First of all, you got to take measurements. You got to have metrics in your business. I'm a fan of less is more, but you got to measure what matters, because otherwise you're not going to know if you're winning or not. So you have to ask yourself, what are the handful, what are the few, what are the select things that you want to track, the metrics you want to track that are crucial for your business to know and to monitor. Like, so what are the things that are really going to move the needle? And you do have to be selective here, because like if you try to choose and do a lot of things, like, and by the way, this plays back into one of our earlier lessons on simplicity, right? When everything is important, nothing's important, and not only are you not going to do it, but you're not going to be able to interpret the results in a way that's going to be fruitful for decision making. Because at the end of the day, the reason why you keep metrics is so that it's kind of like, checking, your GPS, like, am I on the right road? Am I making progress? And so this is for decision making. It's not just for like informational purposes only, like that'd be useless, right? And so you got to kind of use these and have numbers that are fruitful in terms of your ability to make decisions off of them.
Right. So I want to use an analogy before we actually tell people what, are the top measures they should be using. Think about it like the trip. You're going on a trip from, let's say, Michigan to LA, and you have your GPS input, and you have, hit start, and now you're on the road. What are you tracking on that? You're tracking, that you're on the right track, right? So you're following the GPS. You're tracking how fast you're going, like how many miles per hour. You're tracking maybe, your time that you have left. So you're tracking certain specific things that are the most important to the trip. You're not tracking to make sure you have, 35 PSI in your tires every 5 miles. You're not tracking to make sure you have enough oil every 10, 15, 20 miles kind of a thing, right? Because those things are just running in the background to make sure that the biggest things are going to get you to where you want to go. And I will tell you that from my experience, if you try to track everything, I think you're going to lose your mind kind of a thing.
You're just
not literally, but it's going to be very difficult for you to track everything. And you're not going to know the full picture anyway. You know what I mean?
Right. I think you got to really figure out what is most important. And, and speaking of metrics here, I want you to consider two kinds of metrics to start looking at. One is actions based and one is results based. So action based simply means that, hey, I'm going to make 10 sales calls a day, or I'm going to send out 500 postcards, or I'm going to do X, right? These are things that are within your control, and that through a track record of experience, you realize that if you do these things, eventually you will get to X, which is your results-based metric. And so, for instance, you can say, like, let's say you're a real estate investor, you're like, hey, I want to close 5 deals this month. Well, that's a results-based metric. That may or may not happen in and of itself, but you can guarantee that you're going to do the things that, based on your statistical history in your previous experiences, like, are likely to result in that. And so this is where you really want both, I think. You're not just one or the other.
Yeah. And I think both of those and they connect together, right? Because the action, metrics are going to show you the results. And in order for you to get the results, you're going to have to take certain actions. So that's why those are so important, because they're connected together. And I think, and if you look at our previous podcast that we talked about, vision, right? One of the things that is going to help you determine which things to measure is your vision. Yeah. Vision that is going to tell you, what is it that I need to measure in order for me to get to that vision? We talk about profit. We talked about profit first in the previous, example. That would probably be one of those things that you want to measure, and so forth.
Well, the other thing, man, is, like, I just thought of this too, is like, business results are not perfect and they're not consistent necessarily all the time. And so you can feel discouraged if you're only measuring results-based metrics. But if you're measuring action-based metrics and you're putting in the work, you can kind of celebrate, like, hey, and I mean, I feel this way. Like, when I get work done, I feel good about it. And so this gives you a way to win and give yourself positive reinforcement that you hit your goal on this on the action-based metrics. So you can still experience some kind of victory as the lag time to achieve that result kind of marinades. So it gives you some short wins as you're moving towards that results-based metric. Which I think is super important.
Yeah, and I think perfect example is building muscle. If you measure, like, you want to look like, bodybuilder, right? And you're going to the gym and you're measuring yourself based on the fact that I want to look like this, you're going to get pretty discouraged pretty quickly, because every single day you go to the gym, you're not going to see a huge difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But when you start measuring action-based some kind of results, and maybe you're measuring that I'm, increasing my weight, right? And I think you would have a better conversation than me in this area. But if you start tracking those kinds of things, you start writing them. Whenever me and Wojo go to the gym, I see he's got this pad and he writes his stuff down. I think he's just scribbling some nonsense in there, but he says that he's actually tracking himself.
Right.
But those are the kind of things that are going to get you moving, right?
Right. I mean, you gotta measure what matters, because it's crucial for improvement. What you measure, you can track, you can start to make changes if you're not seeing the results you want. All right, next one is better is better. Now, the reason why
that's not a typo.
It is, right. Yeah, better is better. Okay, thank you, genius. Like, tell us what this means. So this is in regards to, I think, the commonly held misconception that bigger is better. And this is a widely prevalent perspective, I think, that hurts a lot of businesses. It hurts a lot of people too. A bigger house, a bigger car, a bigger bank account, even. But especially in returns to a business, bigger is not better. It is not better. Better is better. And so this is a really important thing to keep in mind. Now, how do you determine and how do you define better? Well, to me, better is my business is more aligned with my vision than less aligned. And so the better my business becomes, the more in alignment with that vision it becomes as well. And so it's not even necessarily about a top line revenue. It's about the business being better. And it's not a result of scale. It's not related to scale in really of any sorts.
Yeah. So how you explain the fact that you have all these huge muscles, you went for bigger is better?
Okay, bigger. Well, dude, listen, in all seriousness, in bodybuilding back in the day, in the 90s and early 2000s, there were these quote unquote mass monsters who were showing up at 280 pounds on stage. And it didn't look, it was kind of impressive that the human body could go that far, but it wasn't super aesthetically appealing. And meanwhile, you had guys that were up there, 230, 240 that looked like Greek statues, and looked amazing. And so better was better there. It wasn't necessarily just bigger. And so the same with our business. Do we have loaded businesses that really are kind of just that size has become a compensation for a poorly running business, and you're trying to overcome, weak margins or a weak staff or, some other issue in your business by just scaling it, and trying to, out compete it. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I think you told me at one point that when you hit yourself, I think you hit 235 or 240. You had a hard time tying your shoes.
Dude, 250. Right? It was not fun. It was not.
And you couldn't tie your shoes or bend over and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So there is a limit to that. But so here's on serious side of things, when it comes to building a business, I think one of the fallacies in this particular thing that ends up hurting businesses is, the bigger is better kind of a thing. Is that the company owners, they go for this bigger. And what they do a lot of times, they go for the bigger before they literally streamline or they make the things that are necessary work right, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? And they scale. And what ends up happening is the problems in the business that were there before they scaled it just get much bigger. Yeah. And there's a bigger kaboom kind of a thing that happens. So when you start focusing on better is better, you start looking at, okay, so let's look at, hiring the right employees as opposed to hiring 50, 80, 100 employees, having our business as fast as possible to build this. Let's make sure that our hiring process is streamlined in such a way that we hire really, 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 really good people that are, aligning with our company, with the culture, that are serving our clients, that all those good things. And then when we have that thing streamlined, not saying that we, don't hire until we get it done, but as we are going down the steps, right? We hiring one person, second, third person, we start to streamline this process more and more and more. And then when we feel like we're pretty good, then you can start scaling a little bit more. But what ends up happening a lot of times, people are just, let's say from an employee perspective, they go and hire the first person, second person, third person as fast as possible. And guess what? They don't hire the best people in their life, in their company. And I think ends up hurting the company. And I think about when we've been doing our events, we've been growing our events based on that better is better principle, I think, because we're streamlining and doing those different things. Hey, so let me interrupt this episode. And before we get back into it, here's what I want to share with you guys. One of the things that we do throughout the year, all over the country, is we do this event called Business Builder Event. This is the event where we literally outline, help you figure out and create a business that you love and a business that support your life. One of the things that we found over the years that many people become basically a slave or work an employee to their business, and they're working so much in their business that they don't actually get to live their life. And in this particular workshop, we help you redesign that, a business that supports your life. So what do you want to have for them, Wojo? What do we have for them because of that?
Man, well, Peter, because they are loyal listeners, and I know they're tuned in every week, and they've told everyone in their life about the Life in Your Show podcast, we have a very, very special offer for you. Now, by the way, I don't know how long we're going to offer this, so this isn't forever. But if you go to lifeinair.com right now and you go to the events tab and then you go to the Business Builder Workshop, you can, when you pick the event you want, when you go to that checkout page, there's a little place right there. It says enter promo code. And guess what? We have a promo code for you for 50. That's 50% off the ticket for the Business Builder Workshop by entering the promo code podcast into the promo code field. Instantly, you'll get a 50% savings. You'll see it right there on the screen, and you will be registered for that event. And here's the cool thing. You will be off to the races to create a life and a business that complement each other for the first time, maybe ever. And it's amazing.
One more thing I want to share with you before we jump back into the episode is this. One of the participants at our recent podcast, he was in a hot seat. We do these hot seats in front of the room, and we kind of dissect their business. And one suggestion that he got them, he made the change, went home, made the change, and pretty much within a few months went into stage 4, meaning into his business that the business basically supported his life. The income that was coming, the cash flow that was coming into his business, by making that one change, started living in a way that he doesn't have to work for the business works for him. So I would encourage you guys, head over to the website, get, learn about this event, type in podcast, and we'll see you on the next event. Now let's get back into the episode.
Like if your business is already a hot mess, you're basically just pouring, and it's already on fire, you're basically pouring gasoline on a fire to scale when you already have a disaster on your hands. You need to put the fire out first and then worry about what you really want this thing to look like. And so that continually refining and getting better is a crucial part, to your business. And one of the reasons why is like, we talked about this a lot, especially previously with the keep it simple principle, is that business volume, business size very often, almost always leads to increased complexity. And so when you already have something that's not working as well as it should, those friction points, those bottlenecks, those weaknesses are, it's like the tide is going out and you will be exposed at a much, much, much higher level. And so you got to get things right, and get them better, get them aligned early on before you do that. We've also talked about this as well in regards to getting better. Margins oftentimes decrease with scale. Maybe not for like if you're buying widgets and you can buy 10,000 of them versus 1,000 of them or 500. Maybe those margins there's a little cheaper for you, but the overall margin of the complexity of the business oftentimes will eclipse that. And so you got to be careful with that. So there is a parable about this we tell it at the Business Builder Workshop about the Mexican fisherman. We won't go into it here. You can look it up online or come to the Business Builder Workshop. You'll tell you about that. But one of the things to realize is that what may seem to be like an idyllic business in terms of, something that's big and glamorous and sexy and brag worthy, oftentimes can be the thing that is going to, not give you the life you want and sacrifice the things that are most important to you.
I think, So listen, I think that bigger is better is one of the biggest contributors to stress, marriages failing, and people, thinking about like, I want to start the business because I want to have freedom, and actually end up not having freedom because they end up working 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of a thing, because it's that bigger and better as opposed to what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yep. As a quick example of this, we'll use a simple example. Steve and Laura Halverson, who Steve is now a coach for Life and Air. Like these guys got into rental portfolio business where they got up to 84, 86 properties, somewhere along that line. And their goal was 100 because they had made the assumption that bigger is better. And they wanted 100, and there's some ego involved in there and some bragging rights and some of those kinds of things as well. But what they realized is like, as they got farther and farther along that path, their business started becoming worse and worse, and their life started becoming worse and worse as a result of this complexity that naturally follows business as it scales and grows. And so they actually are an awesome example of, you guys may have heard us talk in the past about the SEED method of strategic elimination, automation, delegation. And they went through some of these things without even knowing exactly having the formula in place as it is today. And they saw tremendous benefits of that. And so they were able to simplify their businesses in a huge, huge way, which changed their cash flow in a huge way, which changed their vacancy rate, which changed their amount of debt, like all of this stuff. And more than anything else, like really allowed them to enjoy their business more and have more time for their personal life. And so just an illustration, like this applies to every kind of business. Whether you're a flipper, whether you're a retailer, whether you're an online entrepreneur, whether you're looking at properties, like this principle applies everywhere. So just be wary of that.
And I think that is reinforcement why it's so important to have a clear vision for your life.
Yeah, dude. Yes.
Because if you don't have that, what ends up happening is, especially like, you've guys heard me talk about, the 6 human needs, right? And a lot of us, like for instance, significance is a big deal, feeling like we matter, like we're up to something, like we are important people and things like that. So bigger is better. It seems really good. And if you don't have a clear vision, I will tell you this, most likely you're going to end up in that place where, like in their case, they literally cut back on a lot of their real estate and they literally started making a lot more money just doing that, cutting back and making better is better.
They went from a negative 10 grand per month to a positive, gosh, I want to say 16-ish grand, 15 grand, somewhere around there, which is a huge swing simply by, they were smarter. They really they sold off a lot of the portfolio. They looked at these things analytically, like we talked about the metrics, right? They weren't taking metrics. They weren't looking at their numbers. They weren't analyzing things. They weren't following the principles that we're sharing with you here. And so when they started doing that, like things started really changing in a huge way. So it's just one illustration of many that I think, you could probably resonate with and understand.
Yep.
All right, next one, continual improvement. So this is essentially the improvement, the principle that you can't just rest on your laurels. You can't rest on your degrees or your previous education or your previous successes. And you really got to commit to this idea that you're never going to arrive. And I know that it can seem discouraging to some, but it's really, I think, an encouraging message to hear because it means you can always get better. You can always grow. If you're not in the place you want to be right now, well, guess what? You put in the time, you put in the effort, you get around the right people, you get the right help, you can get there. But it starts with this commitment to realize you're never going to arrive. I think it was John Wooden who said, it's what you learn after you think you know it all that counts the most. And so this is just a way of being that I want to encourage you to embrace because, it's consistently improving, it's consistently focusing and consistently getting better. And that person will eventually beat out the person who's more talented or even smarter because they're going to stick with it.
Right. And I think if you're seeing this video on YouTube, you see that, the phrase of consistency, focus, and persistence trumps talent, intelligence alone. And what I want you to consider is this: talent, intelligence, it's a skill. That's what the category I'm putting it in. And the consistency, focus, and persistence is who you are as a person, the way you are being, And those things, how many times have we heard that you can easily improve talent, but you can't improve person's, motivation, person's focus, or, those kinds of things. So when you come to hire people, you want to make sure that there is those kinds of things in play for those people. So I truly believe that when you start looking for consistency, that's why a lot of times you hear this person is not that much smarter than this other person, and yet they're winning in business. Yeah. And the reason it is because they're consistent, they're persistent, they never quit, they keep going, they keep moving forward, they keep testing different things, keep learning about themselves, personal development. We just had somebody on the podcast that this guy is in his late 50s, I think, or 60s, and he says, I am now more into personal development than I ever was. And he's owns a successful company. And so those things are, I think, so important that you never get to a point where you feel like I've learned it all. I know everything. Because I think when you get to that point, you're done.
Well, man, I also want to encourage people this really is a tortoise in the hare kind of scenario where you got to just commit to the long term and not, I'm not saying listen, this is just my opinion, shoot for a book every 2 weeks or even one a month, but actually do something with it instead of trying to read a book a day and then burning out or not doing anything with it and letting it just be head knowledge. And so you just got to commit to the persistence involved in this because the more and better you get consistently, eventually this compounds and it snowballs and you build momentum and you get better and you start seeing these victories. And now, for instance, in my life, man, and by the way, there's people that have probably way better lives than me, way more money than me, and all that. But
better looking than you,
right? But I'm pretty happy, and I've set things up pretty well. And what this has allowed me to do is it's a snowball. So I have people come to me, they're like, "Hey, man, it's nice to be you. You can only work, 15 hours a week if you want to, or less, or whatever." And so, for instance, at the end of the year, I'm gonna take some time off. They're like, "I can't do that." And I'm like, yeah, but listen, like I'm just further along the path than you are. That's all. There's no difference between you and I. It's just that I've been doing this longer. And so now, where I now have all this extra free time, yeah, I can get better. And it's easier for me because I'm not as squeezed for time, and I can find those opportunities more easily. But you just got to start. You just got to stick with it. You just got to do it and commit. Like we've had, people, and I tell people when they join our titanium coaching program, like, listen, like this is not an overnight success, and we can't do the work for you. We're here to do it. You don't have to do it alone. We're here with you, but you're going to have to do, it's going to take some time to turn around 100% your life and your business. And are you committed to that? And when they say yes, then I know that this is something that we can do for them, but it's not going to happen in 2 weeks. Like it's not, I don't care if we had a $1 million a year coaching program and we, it's not going to take 2 weeks to turn everything around. It doesn't matter. It's the consistency and the continual improvement that's the secret.
Yeah, I think that's why you a lot of times see lottery owners, for instance, they win $1 million lottery, and within the year they're broke and they're actually in a worse spot than they were before.
Yeah.
Because, who they were didn't change. So I think the snowball effect, I think, is really powerful analogy to use here, because if you think about it, even for my own life, the way I am having conversations today, or the way we talk about events, or, whatever it might be, my skill set, who I am has been a lot better than it was 5-10 years ago. Even when I was thinking about my 20s, holy cow. So when you start looking from the perspective, the patience to keep developing that and keep looking for it. I'm not there yet either. I need to polish up my accent, right? So there is a lot of those kinds of things when you start looking at the snowball effect and just what's the one little thing that I can shift today? Just one little thing. The 1% improvement, right? It's going to help building your
And that's it, dude. That's exactly it. Because like so in my life, I look at this, and this is probably one of my superpowers, if I have any, is I just keep going. And so my PhD took 7 years. Just that degree by itself took 7 years. It took me over 10 years, to be 11 years, to win my first bodybuilding contest of like 10 years, 11 years of competing. That's not just lifting, that's competing. Imagine that, never winning for 10 plus years. When I was my first real estate deal, it took me 82 offers to get my first deal accepted. So you just got to keep going. You got to keep going. Like, and I have story after story. This is just a theme. Now you could argue that I'm just really slow, which would not be.
I wouldn't argue that.
I would not argue against that. Yeah. But this continual improvement, I'm telling you, it's not sexy, but it is true.
It happens all the time. That's why I think, when you look at fake books and you can Instagrams and all that kind of stuff, and you see these gazillionaires telling you out in 24 hours they did this and all that kind of stuff. If it's true that they actually were able to do that and not just they're putting on some kind of a show, if it's true, what they don't tell you is the years and years and years and years and years of continual improvement that they worked on themselves, or they, worked on that funnel and perfected that funnel and keep working and changing different things in order for that $1 million to happen, that 24 hours kind of a thing.
Yep. And just to kind of drive this point home, there's an awesome kind of book series by Stephen Pressfield, who talks about basically, he has a couple of books that you might want to check out, like Do the Work, Turning Pro, and some other things. And he talks about an amateur, and this is, and I'll give you an example. An amateur will keep practicing something until they don't get it wrong. A pro will keep practicing something until he doesn't. Sorry. I messed that up, dude. An amateur will keep practicing something until they get it right. Yep. A pro will keep practicing something or doing something until they don't get it wrong. And so be a pro. Let me just say it one more time, because everybody, some of you are like, what's the right one? An amateur will keep doing something until they get it right. A pro doesn't stop until they don't get it wrong. And so apply that mentality to your business. Man, it's game changing.
Yeah.
So again, I'm looking at the slides here. look for ways to continually improve yourself, continually improve your business, and also just kind of become great at asking questions and looking for solutions, because everything you kind of need is in front of you already. Now, and I know sometimes it's hard for you to see that on your own, and that's why we have things like coaches and peers to help us through that. But you got to kind of like start to really think through on a more meta level, what are the things that I really need to be improving on? Where should I just direct my focus? Where do I need to improve? Like, if you guys, well, you can't see it now because I'm in my virtual theater, but usually my background is my bookshelf. And my wife's like, why do you have so many books? And I'm like, well, I never know when, and by the way, only about half of those are read. And so she's like, why don't you read the ones you have before you buy new ones? And I'm like, well, I don't know what my next area that I'm going to have to focus and develop is. And so I want to have that available for me when I'm ready to do that. And so like, you got to look in these areas of your life where you're deficient. And I don't want to rustle feathers here, but let me say this. And I don't mean this in a way so we've heard like this phrase, like, I'm enough. And from a human perspective, from a person who deserves to be loved perspective, yes, 100%. You are loved by God and you're an amazing human. But you may not be enough to get the results you want. You may not have the experience. You may not have the skills yet, the talents yet to do those things. And so you may have to ask yourself the hard question of, where am I not good enough yet that I have to improve? And maybe it's not, I'm not saying like you have to become a web developer, because maybe your skill set needs to be like, I have to become better at finding the right person, right? But you got to have this honest conversation with yourself to address those things that, in an honest way of where you need to kind of like change.
Right. And yeah, so I agree with what he said. The other thing that I want to say is this, because I think some of the listeners on this podcast right now are thinking like, so which one am I improving? What am I continuing improving on? What should I be focusing on, right? Those are the question pops up. And if you think about this, all those different things that we've been sharing with you so far will give you the answer. What's your vision say? What does your vision say that you want to become, who you want to become, right? In order to live that vision. Because one of the things that happens for people is, let's say, I'll give you an easy example. If you're in a dating and you want to meet this girl who's XYZ, and you have this whole idea, like say, for instance, she's, all these different things that she is and she's not, and all the kind of things. Well, she's looking for that specific type of a guy too. So you're going to ask yourself, who do I need to become? So based on that, you're going to start looking, what's the skill set that who do I need to improve? Who do I need to become to do that? That's one area that you can look at to give the answer. The other thing you can look at the 80-20 rule that we just talked about. What are the 20% that are going to account for 80% of my results? Right. So you look at the 20%. So which ones do I need to develop myself in? And you start looking from that. And then based on those things, you start to create what is my things that I'm going to be developing. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on. That's what I'm going to be consistent on. That's what I'm going to be constantly moving forward. And I'm not going to stop, not going to go into some other squirrel until I develop that. Because a lot of times that's what happens. People go squirrel here, squirrel there, and squirrel everywhere. Right.
And that's the focus part, right?
Yep.
So here's just some ideas to help ask yourself the right questions to help you diagnose, whether it's self-diagnosis, business diagnosis, whatever. What's working, what's broken, what's missing or confusing. I got this question. I was in the Entre Leadership Program with Dave Ramsey for a little while. This is one of the questions that they had me start to ask myself. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So that's, Gary Keller and Jay Papasan's book, The One Thing. Great question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Here's another one. What if I did know the answer? Now, I know this one seems a little bit like woo-woo, and this is kind of like a Tony Robbins style question. Like, what if you did know? I don't know.
And
what
you
if
do
you
know.
did know? Right? Let's just have some fun and play with that one. Here's another one too. Like, what if I couldn't do this? How else could I do it? So this will start to open up opportunities for you to think creatively in regards to actions, in regards to ways to accomplish something. Like, what if I couldn't, let's use a personal example. Like, what if I couldn't go to the gym 3 days a week? How else could I work out? right? Those kinds of things. And so these are just examples of questions. Here's another one. What can I simplify, amplify, or clarify? So this is a Post-it note that I have up on my board over here in my office that I constantly am looking for, like, what can I simplify, amplify. English isn't easy, I know, Peter. Or clarify, right? Where is the simplicity? What is too complex? What can I simplify? What is...
I look at it as, what can I sack?
Okay,
S-A-C, sack. What can I sack?
Yeah, we could do that. Amplify if it's going well. Like, what can I amplify? What's already going well? And what can I clarify? What is confusing, right? Kind of a little bit of a different reflection of the first question of what's broken, missing, or confusing, or working. And then who can I get to help me with this? That's another great one. Because that's also a skill. Like, you might think that you just having other people help you is just happens naturally, but that's actually a skill. That's a skill to get other people to help you to do that. So these are all examples of this. For instance, some ways you can improve your business: improve a weak area, enhance a process, enhance a system, improve the quality of your product. You could evaluate and adjust your key KPIs, your key performance indicators, put yourself in a stronger financial position, work on your marketing, branding. These are all just kind of examples of continual improvement that you can use both, in your business and other parts of your life as well. And so that's the lesson.
Well, we went deep on this particular episode.
Yeah, we did.
It's been a long one.
Right.
But hopefully it was beneficial for you guys. And you get some really good nuggets out of this. And listen, one of the things I want to encourage you on is you're looking at all these principles. If you hopefully been watching this series that we created here for you, write those things down and start seeing, okay, what can any of these things apply to my business, these principles? Let's put in part of my values of my company that we're going to be run by. And then just pick one or two or three, no more than three areas that I'm going to be focusing on based on these principles that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Looking at 80-20 rule. What's the top area that I want to focus on? What are my top 20% that's resulting for 80% of my profits and things like that? So let's focus on that.
Let's review real quickly all 10 principles. If you haven't listened to the other 2 episodes, go back and listen to them now. So the first one is it must fit your personal vision. Number 2, treat it like a business, not a hobby. Number 3, you are in the sales and marketing business. Those were all on the first episode. Second episode covered the next 3, which is profit is a priority, keeping things simple, keep it simple, and then ready, fire, aim. That was episode 2. And in this episode, we covered the 80-20 rule, measure what matters, bigger isn't better, better is better, and then also continual improvement. Again, as Peter's saying, we really hope you do something with this. And as always, this is something that we don't mean for simply entertainment purposes or educational or informational purposes. It's for you to have the life in the business you want. And when you implement these, when, you will see the results. And again, just like we've been talking about, it's a snowball effect. It's not going to transform everything 100% overnight, but our guarantee to you is that it will change your life and your business when you choose to move forward with this. If you want more information, of course, join us at a Get a Life Getaway for the vision side of things, or the Business Builder Workshop to learn how to create a business to support that life financially and time-wise. And we'd love for you to leave us a review or a rating and share this with somebody who needs to hear it, who maybe is starting off on their own business journey, or someone who's established in their business and has been doing things for a while, but you see some cracks in their foundation. They're not doing things quite the right way, or they have some conflicting parts of their business that they can be benefited from learning these. So as always, thank you for being a listener, and we will see you next week. Take care, guys.